doing, and it might be their biases. So unconscious biases is the first thing we have to kind of talk about within ourselves. And I do quite a few exercises where I'll place a group of people of different cultural, ethnic backgrounds, and I'll put them on the wall and I'll say, today you're going to choose to be one of these people. And I usually choose a Muslim, someone with a habib or a burqa on. I choose an African-American male who's older, who has an MBA. I choose a younger Hispanic woman, maybe from Central America, who has an associate's degree from a Central American country. I choose a lesbian woman, white lesbian woman, who has 20 years as an administrative assistant, and I'll say, okay, who do you want to be? And amazingly enough, everyone is able to kind of point out what they don't want to be. And that is that unconscious bias.
But isn't that the first thing? It's not what I want to be. There's another element underneath all that.
Yeah.
They call psychological aggressiveness.
Absolutely. And that's the
Am I right?
Yes, you're very right. What we want to do is identify with what is that part I don't want and why don't I want to be that. And when I start tapping into that, then I start realizing, I guess I'm a bias against that. So that's where we have to kind of start. Oftentimes it's very hard to say what you want, but it's a lot easier to say what you don't want. And the don't wants then kind of say, all right, what's the opposite of that look like? And when I do that don't want, I can kind of visualize, why is it that I don't want that? What is it that's been an infiltration in my mind that said, that is not something I want to be? I once did this exercise I thought was very interesting, where it's called what they call the silent interview. And I think one of your coworkers here has done it with me. And it's an exercise where you give 5 questions, and one of them is, what's your ethnic background? And then the second one is, where was this person raised? And then the third one is, what kind of educational background does this person have? Fourth one is, what's this person's generational, what generation this person was born in? And the fifth one is, if they had a lot of money, what would they do with it? And just by staring at the person, you're supposed to answer those questions. Well, when you do that, you're already figuring out your biases, because it's something that you can't avoid. We do it all the time to people. And when we then start to open up and talk about what that person really was, we realize that sometimes we were right, and sometimes we were dead wrong. And it was that bias going through our head saying, this is that person based on something I'm looking at them. But what I find is really interesting is whenever I do it as a Black Latina, when I'm in there, no one wants to mention the fact that I'm Black. They want to avoid that description about me. And I always ask at the end, okay, so why did you not state my color? And oftentimes what they'll say is, I don't want to offend you. Well, that's an unconscious bias of thinking that someone who's dark or someone who's Black is offensive. And it's a bad thing. When those of us of color know, we appreciate our color, we love our color. What we would like you to do is see it. And that's what I call some premises about cultural awareness that we haven't done a very good job with. And let me kind of elaborate a little bit on that. When they talk about 2 premises, one of them is we're supposed to be colorblind. I know you've heard that statement before.
That's not reality.
It's not reality. Because, not at all. Because we're looking at that person, and yet the very first thing, studies have shown over and over again, that the very first thing people see is someone's color. That's the very first thing they see. So to say that I don't see your color kind of ignores a great deal of who you are. And if someone were to say, when people do say to me, well, I don't see you as being Black, I see you as being, like everyone else, I feel like, well, that's taken away a great deal of who I am, and a part that I am quite proud of. So I want people to be able to acknowledge that color is there. Yes, we see it. It's okay to see it, and embrace it, because we do as people of color. We embrace our skin color. We embrace being Latina. We embrace being Asian. We embrace being gay. We embrace those things. So to try to ignore that is ignoring the true essence of who I am. So we have to get dialogue to say it's okay to have those conversations.
Dialogue sometimes goes into other things in people's mind, into arguments, into standoffs. Am I right?
Definitely, definitely. And one of the key things that I would say I do is start with ground rules. So if we're going to have this dialogue, we have to have some ground rules. One of the ground rules is going to be, we cannot attack each other. We're entitled to our opinions, we're entitled to our voice.
This is respect. That's an element in today's society is kind of waning a little bit.
Yes, it is. And that's because we don't set it up in the beginning. So when I enter into an arena or a forum where I'm going to have some of these conversations, the very first thing I talk about is, okay, you guys, let's all put together some ground rules. We're going to be talking about some things that are pretty heated conversations. And what ground rules do you want to have? on doing it. And oftentimes they share respect each other, and I'll say, what does respect look like to you? So we have to break down, what does respect look like? Does respect mean I can't cut you off? Does it mean I can't attack you? So when it comes down to putting those ground rules together, anytime I'm in a situation where we're having that dialogue and we're outside of those ground rules, I go straight back to them and say, you guys, as we discussed earlier.
So, what do you do when you run into a person that is not that confident and can't stand up and do that?
Can't stand up and speak what their truths
Right.
are? There's ways
There's
that
a lot of people.
There are a lot of people, and there are a lot of people who are afraid to speak because they feel like they're going to be attacked or they feel like they're going to offend. So if you remove those two elements and say you're allowed to speak how you want to speak as long as you're not attacking other people. Now you could speak generally of groups, and I also break that down too. If you're going to talk about these dialogues, let's talk about generalizations versus stereotypes. Let's talk about biases versus judgments. And let's kind of break down what those are.
Judgment is a big thing in our society.
It's huge.
It's huge, isn't it?
It's very big. And judgments are things that usually operate more in the negative than they do in
Right.
the positive.
Right.
And so each of us
Or
has...
ignorance, upon ignorance.
And ignorance as well.
Right.
And even that word is a little hard when you say ignorant, because to someone else that might be their truth. And so you have to kind of say, give me more, tell me more where that's coming from, and break down that opinion and that judgment to facts. And kind of say, okay, give me some factual information when you come up with that, because their facts might be true. A person might say, I have judgments against all gays because when I was growing up, someone attacked me who was gay. And that judgment might be very true to them. So then from there on in, they're looking at every person who's that way, may come across in that direction to be that way to them. So that is their truth. So when we say it's ignorance, what we'll say is, let me give you an example of when a gay has not done that. When you've been in an environment, talk to me about times when you've been around gays who have done favorable things to you, and let's balance that score sheet in your mind. Because that's basically what that is. It's basically just saying we've got to call them to the areas where things have been positively done as well as negatively, because it is their truth. And so those dialogues that go on, we talk about the biases, we talk about generalizations. Those are the two areas that, as long as you are aware of your biases and you are able to say, I'm not treating someone based on those unconscious biases, bringing them conscious, then I probably will have a better opportunity to engage with people and feel comfortable in that uncomfortable arena. Same thing with generalizations. As long as I'm able to say, I'm generally speaking about a group. In other words, I can say, Hispanics tend to be lazy. If I make that statement...
That is the idea that so many people in our society have, because they stereotype everybody in this kind of community.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Am I right?
You're absolutely right. And so what we have to do is kind of look at, okay, so give me examples of when they tend to be that way. And the key word is tend, not they all are. The minute you get into they're all, we're talking about stereotypes. If we get into they tend to be that way, and you're open to changing your perspective based on maybe someone else's factual information or some other example that they've given you, then generalizations tend to happen, and they're gonna happen. It's how we perceive the world. We do it all the time, like biases. The goal is to try to open that up to say, if there's something that's gonna change my perspective, I have to be in agreement to be able to change it and be okay with that. Now that's working on us. Go for it.
Several years ago, I was in a rival conference, a shipbuilding conference. And there was a woman there. She was a little bit overweight, very nicely dressed, lacking a little bit in confidence, but she had her program all the way together.
Okay.
And I injected her into the man population on purpose, because all these people with these so-called ideas, what you're talking about,
Right.
especially bias against women,
Yes.
it's still huge.
It's huge.
It's humongous.
Yeah.
You know, so after the presentation, she had the best presentation of everybody. She knew her blueprint, she knew her naval history, she knew mechanical history, she knew metallurgy, the lady, so she got the contract. You should have seen that room. But that condition still exists today.
Yes, it
after
does.
almost 50 years. I've been in this business for almost 50 years. Everything from nuclear power plants to bridges, and I've been just about on construction sites. I've been just about everywhere, and it's still here today.
Right.
How do you get the message that we have to transcend to a different elevation in life, and to have people to really think about women on a different basis rather than think they just need to be pregnant, they need to be in the kitchen, they need to have a pot in their hand?
Right. Now, there's two things you brought up there, and one of them is the glass ceiling that we seem to always be hitting, and that is
It's
people
hard
of
for women,
color.
isn't it?
Absolutely, people of color as well as women.
And I brought
are
that
hitting
on
that
because
glass
I was reading about you in the glass ceiling. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so little
Right.
things that come into my feeble old mind, will bing, throw at you, okay?
Right. So
You
the
know,
glass ceiling
that is one of the most important things why you're here today for me, okay?
You got it.
That glass ceiling.
Yes. All right. So that glass ceiling is one that we have to go through. We're going to have to get through. There was one quote I remember someone saying, "Who says the sky's the limit when there's footprints on the moon?" And I love that quote because I said, we have to get to that point where we see beyond just the ceiling and the sky and how far we can go. But a lot of that is, again, knocking down some of those unconscious biases. Now, let me share with you some background. I was a flight attendant with United Airlines for 23 years. And when I first started, there were no women or people of color in the cockpit as pilots, right? And when affirmative action happened, and remind me to come back to affirmative action because I want to share with you some information about that as well. When it first came through, there was anger. I mean, there were people who were mainstream pilots who were pretty much military white males who were in the cockpit. And they were very bothered at the fact that they had to diversify their little offices, so to speak. And I'll never forget this. Half the time, whenever there was a woman who was a captain or a first officer was landing the airplane, whenever the landing was very smooth, everyone would congratulate the male pilot and not the female one. And whenever the landing was really poor, they would immediately assume that it was the woman who landed that airplane.
That's association.
That was
Negative association.
Absolutely. And after a while, what I found myself doing is the way you would know who's landing the airplane is the person who's speaking on the PA is not the one who's landing. So keep that in mind when you're flying. The one who's on the PA is the one who's doing all the talking to everyone. The other person, the other pilot in the cockpit, whether captain or first officer, is basically doing the flying. So it's kind of like a rotation. If you do the talk, I do the flying. And flying includes the landing. Now, taxiing on the ground is always the captain's responsibility. But in the air, takeoff and landings, that could be either or. So what I made it pick out to do is always let people know that. You'll keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, we have a female captain on board, and she's going to be taking care of our landing, and you're going to find us very smooth. I call attention to it, so that people would then go, wow, why are they calling attention to that? Well, I'm calling attention to it to see whether she did well or not well, at least they recognize that she's still capable, because the ultimate result in landing is any landing where you can get up standing is a good landing. Even care if you bounce into some terminals, that's the case. We've got to change some of that.
You're bringing up things in our society that are very deeply ingrained. You understand that?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
My work is not easy. I'm
not,
aware
that's
of
where
that.
I'm going. Okay? I mean, some of this stuff, Flying Tiger Airlines,
Yes.
from the Second World War,
Yes.
had women pilots.
Yes.
And the male bastion was so angry.
Right.
And I sit there and I was reading history the other day, and I'm reading about how we've come so far in life one way, but we're still in a little tiny chasm in
Right.
other ways.
Yes, we are.
Socially,
Right.
how do you deal with the social aspect of this?
Well, that's the whole thing, is that we all are social creatures. We're all social animals. And so we have to dissect what's social and what drives our social ways of being. How are we and how do we think and where do we get our perspectives? And any time that we are different from the group or from the norm, we're going to have a different perspective.
Well,
Hence why we brought in diversity.
You're talking to somebody who's different, you know that, don't
I
you?
do. I'm looking dead at you, babe. I see.
I'm going to tell you, I'm going to make you laugh, okay, for a second, okay?
Uh-huh.
We're going to get back to our conversation.
You got it.
But in Vietnam in 1963, I was on a search and rescue mission, and everybody was so afraid. You're talking about fear again.
Right.
And they're going, I said, the four-letter word, wind them up, let's go die if that's what it takes. And within months, everybody was doing this.
Was doing
And the captain came to me, he says, what the hell have you done to these people? I said, eliminate the element of fear.
Absolutely.
You increase performance.
Exactly. And actually...
It stands today, am I right?
It does, yes, you're right. That's what I'm saying, that's exactly what I said. Fear isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just makes us be aware that we can't let it get in our way of performing. Fear is that little voice, that little self-talk that's saying you can't, you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you can't do this, you don't have enough information, you don't have enough education, you're not tall enough, you're not man enough, you're not anything enough. That's that little self-talk, and that's fear.
Is this why we have so many minority people falling through the cracks by the millions, is fear?
I would say fear and anger. Yes.
Fear and anger.
Yeah, anger is behind there, and they're stifled
loss of
by
hope.
it. And
I
loss
wanna
of
put-
hope, yes,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely.
So how do you, if you were to resurrect one or two or three or four of these people, how would you go about doing it?
We have already done it. We've seen it through
That's
civil
what I
rights.
see. I see here,
Yes.
I'm reading about you, that's why I asked you the question.
And we've done this in a lot. If we go back to history, history
Mhm.
repeats itself. We've gone through things. I just was having a dialogue with my parents, and I'm fortunate to still have parents alive. My father is 87, my mother's 83, and they have contemporaries. And every time I'm with them, which is quite a lot lately, because I'm making sure I'm spending quality time with them, I ask them, you guys have been through this before. You went through civil rights. You went through some difficult times where color was something that stopped you from getting into places. How did you deal with it? And the information that they gave me was profound. It was basically get involved, get educated, get an understanding. Don't come from an anger place, come from a place of curiosity. Make people curious about you. You become curious about them. Make sure when you're entering into these arenas of conversation and you're trying to get people to really respect you and understand who you are as being someone different, that you give them all of the things that are distinctly different and things that are going to work in their favor. Figure out what their need is and be that need. Figure out when someone says to you, well, we're promoting everyone around you, what does that person have that I don't? And have that dialogue with that manager to say, I've got to figure out how to get past this last lane because I feel like I'm just hitting a certain spot. What do I need to do? Bring in yourself. Instead of blaming those others, figure out what it has to be done and then hold them accountable to that.
You know, you just, I'm gonna cut you off for a minute, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You just brought up the genie from the closet, so to speak.
Okay?
And no, I'm only 39 plus. Okay?
Right there with me.
From 1924 to 1934, the oligarch society and the lumber barons and the train barons, they ruled this country with iron hand.
Right.
Everybody was working. So today, 80 years later, we have that same identical chemistry today that I've written about in my book. We have that same identical chemistry today. And the Great Depression happened from all these people sucking all this money out of our economy to put it in their pockets.
Right.
It's going to happen again.
Yes.
It's here today.
It is.
With this election, it's here today. The element of fear, all these things you're talking about. So what would you say to people about history repeating itself?
Mm-hmm.
How people fixed themselves then in relationship with technology, how people today should fix themselves with people like you around?
I think it's all, first of all, we have to all look at ourselves and say it starts with me. I have to start with how I am. Where am I getting my information? If I'm getting my information from a soundbite that the news media is perpetuating in my mind or putting out there so I'm supposed to hear, I need to find out what the truth is and what the real facts of that is, instead of just getting on that bandwagon and saying, you know, this is it. If you think about the loss where Hillary took a dive was because of the emails, and everyone jumped on the bandwagon of the emails. But did everyone really know the truth behind those emails? Well, no, because we wouldn't allow that. We didn't get that on that bandwagon.
It didn't get that far.
Didn't get that far. No.
This election was much further than that. There's a lot of gerrymandering on both sides.
Absolutely.
You know, there was a lot of plotting on both sides.
Yes.
The bad thing about it is Hillary and Deborah Wasserman Schultz, they didn't plan their plan well enough, and the Republicans were on their job 24/7 from the time of President Obama went to office.
Exactly.
So that's what, you know, and when they started cutting the voting, that's what killed this election. We're talking some very deep stuff here today. I call it deep stuff because, you know, it's Thoughts of a Common Man is here to tell you like it is. We're not here to powder coat it, sugar coat it, whatever. We're going to tell you what life is all about, and we bring people to you. And you know, we've had people from human trafficking, and a lot of people say, well, why would you want those people on? Because they're the bottom feeders of who we are. They're not the bottom feeders. They're the savers of a lot of women out there. And right now we have people living in garages. And you know, getting back to this fire this past week, Lisa, 2 weeks ago, that was a tragedy that never should happen. But it's going to happen again in Oakland because people are living under adverse conditions with gentrification.
Yes, definitely.
You know, so here's another problem that you have on your shoulders, madam. And along with what I see in you is the fact that you have so many people out there with so many problems who want to move up in life and they don't have the facilities or the help to do it. So how would you attack that?
You know, when you make that or ask that question, I can't help but think of privilege, the word privilege.
Ooh, that's a bad word.
And what that means. Well, I'm going to turn it around to be a good word. And
Okay,
here's
there we go.
how I'm going to turn that around to be a good word. If you can think of yourself as something that you have an advantage over, because when I define privilege, I say it's a unfair advantage that I have over someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's kind of an oxymoron. It's an advantage, but it's kind of unfair. When I think about myself and I think about my family and how my parents, who were together, so my sister and I were, all our lives, and how they put us through college and helped assist us in many ways, I think, I had a privilege over some of my other cousins who didn't have that. And with that privilege, I was able to think more and I had more opportunity. So if we can all look at what am I privileged above someone else? Now, of course, when we think privilege today, we think of race, we think of the white man privilege over anyone else. When in all actuality is what privilege do I personally have over someone or something else? If I can put that in perspective, that raises me a little more. Because we all want to feel like we have something a little better, has an advantage over something else. That's our psychological mentee that needs that. So think about where you were privileged over someone or something else, and think how you felt when you were in that privileged point. Part of you felt really good because you were thinking, hey, I've got this and I'm looked at because I have this certain power this certain way. And part of you was feeling, wow, that means by me having this, it's at the expense of someone else. And therefore I've got to pay it forward. So when I think about people who are looking for or wanting to strive and wanting to be that, first they've got to find out what do they have a privilege over first. And build on those feelings and that what they've accomplished to say, wow, if I think about that privilege, I can say it has helped me do this, this, and that. Start with that tiny step. Once we start taking those steps and start seeing our accomplishments, then we start feeling better about who we are. We start seeking out the resources, and others will pay attention to us a little better. But we can't come at it as a place of, pobre de me, feel sorry for me, give me everything, or blame, or you did this to me.
Come out of your shell.
Exactly.
Come out of that damn shell.
And build yourself up so that others can see who and how big you are. If you're not doing that, others are not going to see it. So it has to all start with who you are as a person and start with that privilege. Now, I will honestly say, having said that, there is an advantage over certain people who have privilege in our society and the outlook of what that looks like. And those are people who basically have never been treated like or felt like a second-class citizen. Yes, they have a privilege that others cannot speak of and be part of. But that is not to say you can't persevere. That is not to say you can't challenge where you are or the protocol. There's a term that we use whenever I'm training things that are kind of uncomfortable for people. It's called the tolerance for ambiguity. And that tolerance for ambiguity is tolerating something that's uncomfortable until it becomes comfortable. And so right now we are all in a tolerance for ambiguity. Whether we're for the president election or not for it, we're all in that uncertain place that we're not comfortable with. And so that perpetuates a lot of anxiety, a lot of anger, a lot of crises. But with that crisis, if we can all turn around and say, okay, what part can I control? And what part can I do better with? Ultimately, we will see this similar to the way civil rights brought it today. We all have to get on an agenda to say we all want to make this better. And I'm going to share something before you interrupt, because I know you're looking at my face like your face is showing me another question, but I want to say something. Now, we think about...
Are you reading me?
I am.
Oh, God.
I am.
Heaven's a Megatron.
Oh, gosh, and I lost my train of thought, so go ahead and say it now. We got to that point.
You're an injectionist.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
In other words, you inject, and you actually motivate people. And there's not many people like you anymore.
Well, I'm hoping to get more people on my side. I'm hoping to start a train of people who are willing to do what I'm doing.
Sorry I blew your train of thought, but that was that came into being you're actually a light in the dark, so to speak, for a lot of people, especially where society is geared today.
And I'm hoping that light will continue to glow, and especially for that next generation. Let me talk to you a little bit about generations. Do you mind if I take a moment
Sure.
on that? Because I
No,
really
go
like
ahead.
that piece.
I'm not going to interrupt you, though. I want to hear this.
Okay, so on generations, if we talk about generations and where people are, in the past, our traditionalists, and then we look to see where our baby boomers are, and we look to see what our Gen X's, and we look to see where our Gen Y's are, and we kind of go through each generation to what was happening at the time that they were born. So I'm going to kind of go back and kind of give you some, just a little ballpark, and you fill in because you've been part of that traditionalist and baby boomer upper phase that I haven't. So looking at traditionalists, we look at those who they call the silent generation, and I hate to use the term silent like they don't speak or don't say anything, but they did come from a generation that said people are seen and not heard. And so they kind of have that way about them. You speak when spoken to. You don't just speak on on how you feel. You hold back and you keep things at bay. And so that generation, the traditionalists, they're in their 80s, upper 80s, middle 80s, and probably late 70s, because they're kind of in that category. They see people today and they think, oh my gosh, one, you guys are too exposing. You give away too much, because they're very private in their way. They've been through the Great Depression, so they're very good about keeping things and making sure that things that are not broken aren't getting tossed. Now, for those of you out there who have parents who are elderly, you know that sometimes we see it as a pack rat. They see it as you keep things because they don't want to be without when they die. And to toss some of these things is going back to a place that they're in fear of, and that's to die without anything. All right, so that's kind of like that traditionalist. We do see them in the workplace today, not as much, but we are seeing some of them still hanging on to their positions. Then we go into the baby boomer. Baby boomer is that person who kind of came in very different than their parents. As a matter of fact, they wreaked havoc to their parents simply because they were live and let live, have fun today, get high, Woodstock, not worry about tomorrow. And they were very frivolous in their way of being. And a lot of baby boomers didn't really think about saving. Unlike their parents who were saying save, save, save because they knew it was going to be without, this group just kind of said, let's just have a heyday and have good today. Until about their 40s and 50s, they woke up and said, oh my gosh, we have no retirement. What do we do? So suddenly it became, we have to start working and we have to work hard. And they worked around the clock. That 9 to 9 became that workaholic phase. Well, what simply happens when people are working all the time, relationships fail. And so a lot of the marriages that were going on with the baby boomers fell apart. 50% of the marriages, to be exact, if not more. And a great deal of that, when that happened, a lot of women were saying, I'm working full time, so why do I need him? And a lot of men were saying, wait a minute, I come home, dinner's not on the table. And she's like, I know, where is dinner? Because I'm working too. So there's this difference of people, and so in that the roles changed, and with the roles changing, there was a lot of divorce. They also manipulated the stock market to work in their favor because they were trying to do quick income and try to make it so they can get money quickly because they waited so long to get their retirements. Jobs or companies were not doing pensions anymore. They were pulling away, and they were not being loyal to their employees like their parents had that loyalty, starting in a job and ending in a job with a pension at the end. Well, that was shifting and changing, so the way that baby boomers were working was different. In the meantime, they had Gen X and Gen Y. And Gen X and Gen Y kids were considered latchkey. Remember the term latchkey kids?
Yeah.
Yes. And they became very independent. Why were they so independent? They're independent because their parents were working 9 to 9. They're independent because their parents were split up and they're at one house and the other house. So they become very independent and very creative in their way. When they got to a point of working, they changed the model of what work should look like. They had industry come in their way. They were able to get technology. They were able to bring in devices. They were able to kind of figure out how to be creative, and they coined the phrase, I want to work smarter, not harder, unlike my parents. So work-life balance became very big for this group. They were also told, you know what, there will be no jobs out there for you. And there wasn't. Time Magazine had this big thing saying, these kids are not going to have any jobs. Why? Because baby boomers weren't leaving. They were sticking around for a long period of time. So they started to do the startups. They created. And then Gen Y came. By the way, Gen X was called Gen X because they didn't like to put labels. They don't like to be categorized in anything. So they call them the X generation because they didn't like that category. Gen Y came in after that, and they added even more to it because they were born in full-fledged technology. They understood technology and they used it to their benefit. They got very quiet. They were kind of very similar to traditionalists, where they get to be very silent. And you ask them a question, do you want to do that? Yep. Are you okay? Yep. Do you want to eat? Yes. And they really weren't answering much because they had technology that was their whole world of being social. So when we talk about that social element, we think that that Gen Y group is very individual, when in all actuality, their individuality is that computer in front of them and all the people in front of them that they are reaching out to. So they're very social in their independent way. Now, if you look at all four of those generations, we think, what are the things that are happening with all four of them? Well, they're definitely changing how they think. One thing about Gen Y is they're very diverse. They understand diversity. Why? Because they have that computer in front of them and their world is connected. They look at things in a global perspective. Their music is the same. Their clothing is the same. Their look is the same. We have white kids in Europe who are listening to rap. We have Africans who are listening to rock and roll. We have all of these differences that are emerging. So my whole point of bringing this up is because I see that ultimately with this next generation, the Gen Y, they are much more embracing of difference than any of the generations previous to them. So when I look at where are we going with this crisis that we're in it for only a phase until that Gen Y gets to an age of saying, we're not tolerating this. They even have a new term. I know you've heard the term LGBT, and now there's that Q. What does Q stand for? Q is that questioning. They're embracing everyone for who and what they are, unlike their previous generations. So when I see what's happening in the future, I see hope. I want to work with that group. I want to work with my group, like the baby boomers, the tweeners that I call myself. I want to work with the traditionalists, be able to look to see how we all added something to where we are in this world and how we're all changing and evolving. And some people, especially that in the middle of the state, their evolution takes a little longer because they're not so caught up in what's happening in the mainstream. But we get it. We're working our way through the United States, and I see that through generations we're going to see a difference. We are definitely going to see a difference in how we work and how we are with people.
Impact is a big word.
Big, huge.
Huge word.
It's going to have an impact on it, yes.
How the previous generation impacts the next generation.
Absolutely.
Am I right?
Correct.
One of the things that I look at is my generation, whatever you want to call my generation, the dinosaur generation or whatever.
Traditionalist.
Traditionalist. Hey, that's a nice word.
It is. It is.
We kicked ass.
Yes, you did.
We didn't take nobody's stuff.
Absolutely.
You know, something happened. I remember looking at you. Some of the things came back to mind. Listening to you also. The first time I drove a tractor trailer rig, and I was in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and I'd been hitchhiking for 4 days, and this guy says, "I'm gonna get high tonight, young'un." I said, "What are you gonna do?" He said, "You're gonna learn to drive this rig today." I'm sitting here going, "Oh God, his 80,000 pounds here, and what they call a road ranger, no automatic transmissions back then.
Right.
You know, three stick road ranger.
Right. Right.
And I'm going, you got to be joking.
Kidding me.
And I must have drove at 80 miles, at 25, 30 miles. He says, just keep it at 30, 35 miles and just shift there when you get ready. By the time I got into 4 or 5 hours, I was shifting. I was up to 50, 60.
Yeah.
But you know, people like that don't exist today.
Well.
People like that in great numbers don't exist today. When they do, they're making a lot of money.
Yes.
They're doing a lot of other things.
Yeah.
And here's what Thoughts of a Common Man is all about. All that includes in your presentation today is what this program is about. Trying to pass on what I know to the next generation and the generations behind me that I'm part of what's left of.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
That's what we're all about today. Exactly what you've been talking about.
So there's something that I want to kind of bring up, and it's when you hear the term melting pot versus salad bowl. Have you heard those two terms?
Sure.
Okay, so
I'm from Louisiana.
All right. So when you talk about melting pot, what does melting pot mean?
It means that everybody loves everybody, and everybody transcends at the same time, and everybody has to respect everybody. And you know what? The big thing that we don't have is cohesion in this generation today.
Right. So when I think of that term, I'm right where you are, where it's melding together to be the American and to be the one who built it.
This is our dream.
It is. It's definitely our dream. When I look at
and the hell with the alt-rights.
I agree. I totally agree.
The hell with them.
Well, when I think of the term salad bowl, it's kind of the same but a little bit different. Let me kind of share. Salad bowl to me says that
How
the
do you
salad
spell
is a salad bowl, like a salad.
Oh, a salad bowl.
Right, so when you look at a salad, you think, okay, so this is all of the lettuce, and we have distinctive flavors in our salad. We have our tomatoes at different tastes, and the cucumbers are different tastes than the avocados. They all have something they bring to the salad, and the salad itself is America. But we all can embrace who we are without losing or diluting who we are in that salad bowl thinking. And that was my way of saying, I'd like to see America be that salad bowl where your difference is not a difference that brings away, but it enhances the flavor of America. And that each of us culturally can say, as Americans, we are different. Now, if you think about like the Olympics, and you see all the people coming in from different countries, you see Asia come in, China or Japan, you see everyone looking pretty much Chinese and Japanese. And you see some of the Hispanic countries or Italians, you see all of them kind of looking Italian. You look at America and you see all this mishmash of different people. And that to me is that salad bowl, where it all kind of enhances everyone. But the irony of this whole thought process is that Gen Y is turning back into a melting pot because they are crossbreeding. They are marrying outside their race and cultures. They're enjoying life for what life is. They're accepting gay parents. They're accepting a lot more than we are. And ultimately, that melting pot theory is going to come back around again because we're all going to start looking the same because of that mix that's going on.
You want me to tell you my experience of what you're saying?
I do. Go for it.
You know, I was 7 years old in Mississippi. We was coming back from, I think Manassas or someplace, going back to Louisiana. And my mother was in a little store. And the guy stuck his finger out. He said, "You got a little bit of wet back in you, huh, girl?"
Oh, wow.
You know, and I'm going, "The hell is that?" My mother don't have no water on her.
Oh, my goodness.
So I asked my mom, I said, "Mama, you ain't got no water on your back. What the hell is that man talking about?"
Yeah.
You know, but we got the different parts of Louisiana, like in the southern region, the central southern region, where the Creoles and everybody,
Right.
and the Spanish had a garrison outside of Baton Rouge in 1876. Did you know that?
No, I did not.
That was a
Tell
huge,
me more.
and you know, and so all these races right there, you know, were together in this one little part of Louisiana. But you get further north, it changes.
It's
You get further south, you got to mix toward the Gulf. The big thing that I learned about all this today, transcending in today and looking at today, my oldest one's married to a Chinese. My number two, well, he's just promiscuous. He's been married a couple of times. He's got one wife that's German descendant when he was in the military, and then him and a Spanish woman had 5 kids.
Oh, dear.
So he got 7 kids. This boy been different, you know.
So he had a casa chica.
And and my number 3 is married to a Mexican. So, and my number 4, it's just marriage is out of the question.
Not gonna happen.
But I have 12 grandkids, actually 13.
Beautiful. So
And,
you have United Nations in your house.
You know,
Yes.
people just like you, people ask me about this today, and I tell them my kids grew up on military bases.
Yeah.
So race was not a question,
Right.
as is society today.
Right.
So Gen
Right.
X is going to spoil a lot. That's why all these people are having heart attacks in the South right now. Oh my God, I'm gonna have a big one, Elizabeth.
It's Gen Y that's
Gen
that's,
Y.
Right, that's bringing that on. Yes.
You know, and I love it. I love
Yeah.
every damn minute of
I
it.
love it too, and I come from the same thing. I have nieces. My sister's married to a Japanese American, and my nieces are Japanese American, Puerto Rican, and then which is what I am. And then one of my nieces married to an Australian, and my other niece married a Bulgarian. And so when we're at the house, we have these conversations. The perspectives are so wonderful because they're coming from an eclectic group of thought processes and different ways of being brought up. And it's all embracing, and it's all wonderful to hear someone else's because, again, it's their truths and it's what they come from brings us awareness and vice versa. One of the things that I do that I enjoy doing with my consultancy business is expatriation consultancy and trainings. And what I do is there's people who come in from outside the United States to work within the U.S. for a short period of time, anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. And I kind of help them understand what might be the different orientations of the United States thinking versus the country they're coming in from. But one of the first things I do is I ask them, what kind of impact does the U.S. have on the rest of the world? where is the U.S. good? Where are they weak? And I ask their perspectives. And inevitably, the two things that always come up is how can a country so rich have so much in poverty and have so many homeless? The other thing that comes up is why can't you control your guns and gun shooting? And it is amazing how everyone has a perspective of what we are, and then when they get here, they're realizing, wow, it may not even be what we had in mind. So that's why I think that global perspective is so important, because what we think about someone, we have to really kind of find out what the truths are. And I kind of go into that with them when I have these dialogues.
We'll be back in a minute, and we're doing it. DOING, doing it today. And we hope we bring you something good that you can understand and live with. Okay, we'll be back in a minute. Have you put some numbers out there? How to contact you, contact numbers and all. Where's your office at?
I work out of a home office, but I do rent offices all over the city when I have to meet up with people. Yes, so I have a home office that I work out of at the same time. Anytime I have to meet with someone, I can either meet at your corporation company or I rent an office. They use Regis offices all the time. It's like one of the newer things to do. We don't have overhead. So
right, you know, over in Oakland, you can do that right there across from Marriott.
I've used that one as well.
That one is pretty good. It's pretty nice place.
I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but yes, I've used it.
Oakstop?
What is it called?
Oakstop?
Oakstop, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I've used that as well. I kind of like that new thinking of not having an overhead on a regular basis, but having places to meet. So
I want you to do something for me, something special, okay? Kind of target your message at girls a little bit, because you know what, this is one of the big problems we're finding, you know, in our society, that people girls.
Right.
Am I right?
Yes, definitely. You know, it was interesting because I just read this. I want to say it's either Tim Cook or it is Microsoft, and gosh, don't quote me, I don't know which group it is, but I do know that one of the experiments they're doing is working with little girls in Spanish Harlem, and they're teaching them how to code, which I thought was incredibly gregarious in the sense that little girls don't have they don't think they have that math and science minds, and yet they are the ones who have that. They think the extra way, they kind of see through, they see the bigger picture. And so they're working with little girls, and these girls are in elementary school, and they're teaching how to code through a little device where they put this game board on the floor, kind of like if you want to think of Twister. Remember that game Twister where you'd have a dot, dot, dot? So they kind of had that, and then they have this little machinery that's sitting there, and they've got to code the machinery to go to each dot and follow this path. And the outcome of this has been huge, because what they're realizing is kids today are looking for more things that are more tangible. And little girls have been looked at as those who, they really don't even set them up to go into the math and science fields. And yet this particular way of studying and learning is getting them so excited about where they're headed. So hopefully we'll see a wave of this coming in the near future. But let me kind of go back to speaking to women, particularly to younger women.
Right, because the glass ceiling is thicker, it's getting thicker and thicker. Am I right?
Yes, it is, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely
I'm being honest.
The first thing I would say is we as women, and I know some women are not going to take fairly to me saying that, but we tend to stab each other in the back. We tend to not be good with each other. We tend to see each other as competition. We're very catty with each other. And this is not all the time. This is just, you know, we do have this, and this is something that one of those awarenesses you have to say, am I doing it? When I look at someone and I think, oh, I don't like that woman in my office, I got to ask myself why I don't like that woman. Because, in all due respect, in order for us to get to that ceiling, we've got to do it as a group. And we have to do it as a powerful group, and we can. And so that's going to get over. You have to remove some of those obstacles you have about the fellow person in your office who you might be thinking is too cute, or you know, she thinks she's all that, or she's too smart, or she's, you know, sucking up to the you know, managers, or she's trying to be too sexy to them. Whatever your what ifs, your things are, remove them and try to get to the heart of what that person is, because the only way that we are all going to be able to get through that ceiling is if we do this as a whole. And what we have to also do is start showing where we do prove ourselves. I think what happens is we tend to come in as one who feels like we're less than because of that unconscious bias that other people have on us. We're kind of owning that.
Unconscious bias, it keeps coming up.
It does, because that's exactly what it is. We have it ourselves, and other people have it toward us. So what I would say is, when I think about women, I have to kind of say, all right, ladies, what are the things that you want people to know about you? And where do you demand your value? How do you get your value? A lot of value is demanding what you're worth. And that is one of the hardest things to do, determining what your worth is. Let me give you an example. Anytime a woman applies for a job, she will look at the job description, and if she has 80% of the things on there, she'll then go and apply. There's got to be a lot of them. When she goes in to speak of those 80% and she negotiates her salary, she'll negotiate less because she doesn't have the 20%. When a man goes in, he looks at a job description, he'll look at it and he'll say, if I've got 50% or 30% of those things, I'm in. And when he negotiates his salary, he'll say, because I have 30 to 50% of those things, I deserve top dollar. So they already start with an advantage of where they started. And so every time the promotions or the money gets increased, the man is already increased higher and higher, more than the woman is, because she's already not put that out there. So I'm going to challenge every woman out there that when you are negotiating, if you have 50% of those things on there, you ask for more than what you want. Don't ever think that just because they set a salary, that that's the salary you have to accept. You have to be able to say, based on my experience and my exposure and my credentials and my education, I'm asking for more, and this is why. Be prepared at the back end of that to validate why they're paying you that. Be prepared to work hard. Be prepared to be able to say, I've got to work with my teams and figure out what they have that I don't, and then get that. The beauty of being able to push yourself is figuring out what your self-worth is and figure out what your weaknesses are. When you can figure out your strengths and your weaknesses, you get what you don't have. You bring that, and preferably with another woman, and build that team.
Let me say something to you.
Yes.
Having lived like I've lived, and again, I've lived pretty well on the edge. I've come to one conclusion in life, when it comes to women in business, they're much more attentive than a man. They have a better feeling about what's going on.
Yep.
They're able to project themselves a lot better,
Right.
and a better demeanor. They know how to actually get into you socially and psychologically better than men.
Right.
And I like the feel of professional women who are really got their program together.
Yes.
All my doctors are women, all
Right.
5. Well, I have some quirks in there too.
Right.
No one, no man put his hands on me.
Right. In certain places,
But
right.
it's not just that. I didn't go there now. Gina, I didn't go there. But it's the fact that I have. It's a better feeling when you're talking to somebody and they're gonna sit there. I tell people what they want to hear.
Right.
I'm good at that.
Right.
I'm a seller.
Right.
I sell you things that you have to look at yourself, to open up to look at yourself.
Right.
And I'll say something, and not to be negative, constructive criticism, I'm very good at it.
Right.
Right. But getting back to women, when you go in there and they tell you the truth, the man doctor says, oh, you're gonna die in 30 days. I say, what? He looked at me and says, your white count is 100,000.
Wow.
And I says, okay, so what's that mean? He says, you don't really know? I said, man, tell me what the hell's going on. He says, you're gonna die. He said, you have radiation poisoning and leukemia.
Wow.
You're gonna die in 30 days.
How long ago was that?
5 years ago.
So much than 30 days. Huh?
So
right.
I went out and got me a bottle of wine and sit at the beach and said the 4 little words. And I went and picked up the phone at 10 o'clock in the night, called my doctor, my primary physician. And I told him, these bastards kind of got me all pissed off.
Right, they got me angry about this.
He said to me, well, what are you going to do? I said, what are you going to do? I said, we got to look at a different plan. And I was in one of the best hospitals in the city when the guy came in. Well, you got 30 days to live, Mr. Williams. So I says, okay, I think I'll go to Jamaica and I'll drink and have a good time and I'll come back and tell you if I'm here in 30 days. I took off and went to Jamaica, went to Sandals in Jamaica for 5 days, which I'm going again in June for my birthday. And I don't have anybody to take with me yet.
Wait, are you a Gemini?
Yeah.
So why?
Oh my God. So anyway, we're looking at this prognosis, and I'm sitting there in Sandals, eating steaks and doing eating all this wonderful food, walking around with halfway no clothes on for 5 days. And at the end of the 30 days, I came back, I said, hey man, I'm still here. So he says, well, we're going to put you through this and this and that. I said, wait a minute. No, you can kiss my butt. I went back to my primary, I said, what do you got that's better than these guys?
Right.
He said, I got 5 women. I went in there, they did all the tests, and one of them says, we're going to try. I said, that's all you need to do.
And that's all I need to hear.
If I croak out of
Give me
here,
hope.
I ain't got no regrets.
Right.
And then here I am 5 years later, and they're still taking care of me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in total remission.
Yeah.
You know, and I just built me a new 200-mile-per-hour race car.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So
New lease on life. Well, let me share with you, because you kind of said something that triggered my thinking, and it has to do with the emotional intelligence piece of women in power. And I don't know how much you know of emotional intelligence, but it seems to be that big subject matter and topic that everyone is now bringing to the forefront. And a lot of it was by a guy by the name of Daniel Goldman, wrote a book called Primal Leadership.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, and it had to do with a study that he did when he went around to determine IQ versus EQ.
Mm-hmm.
So IQ is, of course, the intelligence of people and measured, and EQ is those unmeasurables, those intangibles. They're very hard to measure. At the same time, they're equally as important. And when he first went around and did his study, he found that a great deal of the Fortune 500 or even 100 companies had CEOs and CFOs and COOs who were highly intelligent, very high in their IQs. When he went around to the people to speak to their direct reports and to the staff, he found that there was a big disconnect between the people who were on the executive team and the workers. And so he started to do some more information. He starts to say, okay, so how well do they give feedback? How well do you have the vision? How well do you know their strengths and weaknesses? How well do they come across? And the majority of people were leaving companies because of that disconnect. So
it was huge.
It was huge.
It still is huge.
Yes. So he broke it down in 5 parts, and I'm going to kind of quickly go through them. One of them was self-awareness, which is what I kind of touched on a little bit earlier in our conversation. When you are aware of your strengths and your weaknesses, you can then determine where you need to grow or what you need to add to your team. And just because you're not good at something doesn't mean you have to become good at it. It means you have to find someone else on your team who is to make you look good. So this first part is self-awareness, determining what your strengths and your weaknesses are. Now I'm going to take it a step further, looking at that in the way of diversity. Is in looking at your self-awareness, you want to look at what are your hot buttons? Who am I? What am I comfortable in my skin? How comfortable am I to me? And how do I come across? How do I show up to a place? So determining that's the very first thing you want to do in your emotional intelligence, or emotional intelligence equation of this. Second part is self-regulation, self-control. How are you when you get angry? What are your hot buttons? How do you manifest some of your emotions in the workplace? Now, this is where women are different than men, because women are able to bring those emotions into the workplace. Oftentimes, men often say, there's no place for emotions in the workplace.
That's not true.
But yet they're able to come in and scream and yell and shout at people.
That's right.
But at the same time, they're not able to cry in front of them, or be empathetic, or understand sympathy in someone. So women have an upper edge over men in that. And ladies, I'm speaking directly to you in these corporate or even small businesses, to look at what you have over your bosses or over those other people, to think that you can bring this emotional intelligence into your IQ and still persevere. Make yourself go higher, because these guys don't own this. So that's the second part of it, is knowing your hot buttons, knowing what triggers you. On a diverse level, how do you know your hot buttons with cultural difference? How do you know your hot buttons with other people of color in the office? Are you competing with that person? Are you thinking the Hispanic group saying, oh, well, she's black, she's African American, she has an attitude? Is this the African American group saying, well, she's Hispanic and she's just lazy, she comes in when she feels like it? Are we doing that to each other? Because those are hot buttons and self-control things we have to kind of look at. How are we looking at that? The third one is motivation. How do you motivate? And when I talk about motivation, it's intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. So when we think about extrinsic motivations, those are easy. That's how much do you get paid? Are you getting your bonuses? What are you doing with the money? And how does that drive you? The intrinsic is, what are you worth and what really drives you? Is it your family? Is it self-growth? Is it, getting into a place where you can ultimately have your own job? When you look at those things, women are much more in tune of what that looks like than men are. Even though men perceive and they push it like they have it.
Men are weak.
They're faking it till they make it, and that's what
They
they
fake it a big time.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you something. 1980, 76? We had to make a part of the nuclear submarine. And you talk about diversity. We had one guy who'd been in the Navy 34 years, 32 years. He was a second class UZ5. I pulled all of these people together. But it all goes back to one thing. The beginning of you as a human being and the relation to you and your self-confidence.
Absolutely.
That's the key.
Absolutely.
My dad used to say, he said, "You see that damn moon up there?" I said, "Yep." He used to tell me, "You may not get that high, but jump anyway. You might get a piece of it one day."
Exactly.
This is what starts.
Yeah. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Hey, and we're back with Lisa Adorno.
Lisa Marie Adorno.
Oh, Adorno. Oh, indeed. Oh, yeah. Adorno. Yeah,
You remember Adorn hairspray?
That stuff.
I mean, Adorn hairspray.
And Long Vine and SD Lauder. That stuff. God, that stuff was
Aquanet.
That stuff. Donald Trump used some
I'm
Aquanet.
definitely aging myself.
Donald Trump used some Aquanet.
Yeah, definitely.
That stuff, hair used to stand up,
Introduce themselves, yes. Definitely.
And it had the worst smell about it, because all chemicals.
Right.
Some numbers. And what we want to do is kind of put out a little sales spill about 2 minutes, okay?
You got it.
You got it. Go ahead.
Okay. So the way to contact me is through my business phone number, and it is 707-718-4844. I'll repeat that. 707-718-4844. My website is transcendereconsultancy.com, and I'll spell that. T is in Tom, R Robert, A, N is in Nancy, S Sam, C is in Cat, E Edward, N Nancy, D Dog, E Edward, R Robert, E Edward, and the word consultancy, CONSULTANCY.com. So again, that's Lisa Marie at transcendereconsultancy.com.
En español, señora?
Transcendere Consultancy, actually Transcendere is to transcend.
Right.
Yeah, so
to
it
move
was
forward.
exactly to move forward, and that's the essence of what my consultancy is all about. So what do? I do a little bit of everything. I do diversity and inclusion, leadership trainings. I do workshops on unconscious biases as well as diversity and inclusion. I do cultural induction training to expatriates. I do coaching. I actually have a coaching certification that I recently received from IPEC, and I do one-on-one coachings for transition, for mid-management, for CEOs, for C-execs, on how to handle differences in the workplace and whatever they might be going through at the time. And I also do facilitations on groups. So group to groups, which is actually kind of exciting to do. Sometimes you see that there might be different huge groups that are struggling with other groups, and I bring them all together to remove some of those silos that are going on in the workplace. A great deal of the work that I do is hands-on, one-on-one, a lot of exercises. People are actually engaged. It's not just didactical teaching, lecture. It's more of engagement, dialogue, and conversations. And I also work globally. I do some work outside of the United States, which has been kind of fun to do. So anytime you're looking for someone to come in and do some consultancy work, I first assess your situation by doing a couple assessments to people. I will do some surveys to figure out what's really happening as a third party. Sometimes I'm able to get better information than some of the executives. And then I kind of compile what the need might be, and I take it from there. Oftentimes I work with companies for up to 2 years just to try to figure out, but it could be as short as just a 6-week, seminars or workshops that we're coming in to try to perpetuate some things and then go right into coaching. So anything of that nature I'm good with, and I have a huge passion for what I do. Thus far, I've been in business now for 5 years. Started off really, it was kind of interesting. I didn't really think I was gonna get a consultancy business. I received my MBA during the down of the economy and came out and no one was hiring. And I thought, my goodness, what did I do? And I started to tell people I have this consultancy because in my previous life as a flight attendant and with United Airlines, I did some trainings for international flight attendants and pilots. And with that experience and that exposure, I have developed and increased my knowledge of it. So I came out telling people that's what I do. And ultimately, people started to say, hey, why don't you come and do a speaking? And before you know it, it turned into a consultancy business that is now very strong, and I'm very proud of it, actually. So ladies, if you're thinking that you can't do something, just start putting it out there and do what you guys do.
There's no such word as can't,
am
I right?
Absolutely.
There's no such word as imaginary thing.
Exactly.
No
So,
such word.
I have passion for my work, and I look forward to continuing to make it grow along the way.
Wow. Blew my doors off.
Well, yeah, it's a little cold in here now.
So, we're looking at somebody who is a common person, who rose to the ranks, and that's what we all endeavor. Am I right?
Definitely.
That is
Definitely.
the dream.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it on a crazy level like I did, but you know, you go out and challenge life.
Yes.
Life is to be challenged. You're born to challenge life. You know, and I'm seeing at all these kids that are now in inner city America who are getting shot every day, and we just had one here in El Sobrante, one of the few in years and years and years. And we want to say to you that, you know, you can do anything that you think you want to do, when you want to do, how you want to do it, and where you want to do it. You just got to put all the stones in the right order. Am I right?
Definitely.
Stepping stones is what I call them.
Right. Most recently, I had a dialogue with some friends about Black Lives Matter, kind of talking about what that means, and there were some people who were opposed to Black lives, so to speak, and saying all my lives matter. And I want to kind of add to what I was sharing with some of my friends, and that was that yes, there's no doubt all lives matter. Until we can actually wrap our brains around and accept that we do have an unconscious bias of the black man, and really kind of own our own individual parts. And I came to this reality with something that happened to me about a month ago. I was facilitating back east, and I was at the hotel, and I went downstairs to get something to eat, and when I asked the guy at the front desk, you know, where's food? He said, well, if you go to the back part of the hotel, as soon as you open that door, you'll see a whole street of, you know, restaurants to go to, so you're better off doing that. So I did. I went to the back. I came back around again. When I was coming back, I had my food in my hand. And as I was coming down the little alleyway that enters into the hotel, there was a black man coming toward me. And my heart just dropped. And I got nervous. And I then got my key out, and the gentleman walked past me, and he said, good evening. And I said, good evening. And that was that. And I walked in the building. And I thought to myself, why did I get afraid? And I was so bothered with my reaction, because I thought, this man did absolutely nothing. But I'd be lying to myself to say that my heart didn't skip a beat over this black man coming toward me, that anyone else on the street was coming toward me. I didn't think this way. So where did that come from? And so I started to ask some of my African American friends and some of my black male friends and say, you know, help me understand what you guys go through. And the amount of people who told me that whenever they are walking by a street and some cars, they'll reach over and lock their doors, or the woman who clutches her purse, or the person who gets up because that person's walking by.
I remember an incident like that, and I felt so bad afterwards. So I was just, you know, trying to get to work, and I saw a group of guys that were all in black, you know, coming down the street. So I crossed the street, went on the other side, and they're like, what's up, lady? We ain't gonna hurt you, lady. We just trying to get to where we going just like you. And then I was like, oh my goodness, I'm doing just like, you know, other folks would do us.
Exactly. Exactly. And that reality is where it's going to make us all look to see, yes, we do have an unconscious bias, and black lives do need to matter, because we have that. It's been perpetuated through media, through, you know, our indoctrination of growing up, through our communities. We're seeing it over and over. And if you have an unfair advantage, you are going to be looked at differently from other people. It's harder to try to persevere that. So we do need to come together and say, let's accept that we all have our biases about that. And then follow up to say, why am I doing that? And yes, we have to be fearful of everyone or anyone at some point or at some things, but follow that gut to say that gut is not saying that every black man is there to harm you. So I had to challenge that thought process, and I appreciate you sharing that, Gina, because I felt the same way. I was almost bothered with myself and ashamed of myself to say, here I am, a woman of color. I've had people take their purses and move them when mine's near theirs, or do things that made me being followed in a store because they thought I was stealing, and I didn't like that feeling. So why am I perpetuating that on someone else? And we have to all catch ourselves doing it.
I guess I'm different.
You're now figuring that out. I'm kidding.
A lady moved her purse on me one day. She did the same thing. And I said, you got a problem with that? She looked at me and she said, pardon me, and she flushed the purse like this.
Wow.
I said, do you have a problem with me sitting close to you and your purse is there? She said, well, and she went on to tell me about her experience. And she said, well, what do you do? I said, I'm an engineer. I said, and possibly I make way more money than you do, I don't know. I said, well, your purse means nothing to me. I said, because I don't live like that, and I have ethics. So she said to me, she said, well, where'd you come from? I said to her, you know what? I came just like everybody else came, someplace across. And she looked at me and she says, I'm sorry. I said, you don't have to be sorry. I said, well, you're living in fear. One of the things is social media today is the worst conveyor of fear. You see black people fighting on Facebook. So millions of people are watching this, and then they can retrieve this thing in their mind that black people are violent.
That's that unconscious bias we're talking about.
That's that unconscious bias.
Absolutely.
And I was in Texas, Beeville, Texas. My job to look at a conveyor, huge conveyor. This thing was like 8 stories. And I walked in this office, and he said, "Hey, boy," he said, "the housekeeping's down at the inn." And I said, "Hey, who are you?" He says, "I'm Buck." I said, "Hey, Buck, I'm the consultant." I said, "I'm the engineer to do your job." And I said, "Now I can report back to your home office this BS that you were talking to me." "Oh, you Mr. Williams." "Oh, Mr. Williams." I said, "Cut it."
Save it at this point, right?
But I'm very vocal about that. Where the two of you have a lot more class than I do. I'm gonna say that.
Thank you, Gina.
This has been one of the best sessions we've had. This has been a good one. And it seems that we have conveyed to everybody out there to be yourself before you be by yourself.
Absolutely.
Live your heart. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Respect and dignity. And we always bring the element of love and respect. Am I right?
You're perfectly right, yes. I have really appreciated this conversation.
So you want to put your numbers out there again?
Yes.
We want to make sure everybody knows where she is and call her 24/7. If you are in trouble and your stuff is stinking and you're looking at the window about to jump out, call Lisa Marie.
No, my phone number is 707-718-4844. That's where you can get me, or you can email me at lisamarie@transcendereconsultancy.com. So either of those would work. I also have a website, www.transcendereconsultancy.com.
Okay.
Thank you.